Welcome and good morning, everyone. It is 10 o'clock and time to get started on this steamy Wednesday morning in Southeast Michigan. We're talking iced coffee and sweet or unsweet iced tea in the chat here. Love to hear your favorite iced coffee flavorings or whatnot as we get started here. My name is Randy Lober. That's Jessica Schmaltz, and we need to talk about drugs with you here today. I am growth marketing manager here at Action Benefits, and part of my role is making sure you and independent health insurance agents are ready to grow your business and to do so compliantly and to be able to educate your clients about what's coming up down the road for them, whether they are part of an employer group plan or whether they're in a standalone Part D or an MAPD plan. What we're going to talk about today with Part D changes is going to impact all of them. As I mentioned, joined today by Jessica Schmaltz, one of our account managers from the individual team. Jessica, would love for you to say hi before we get started.
Hi, everyone. You probably know me, account manager, individual team, like Randy said. I've been with Action for 12 years at the end of this month. So love to be here.
Congratulations on the upcoming anniversary. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about all what we need to discuss here today and how these Part D impacts change everything. Well, touch everything. Before we do that, though, why is there a snail in the background, Randy? You're probably thinking, and if you weren't thinking, I'm going to tell you anyway. A lot of folks probably, last year was the big thrust of the Part D redesign, right? Where a lot of things went into effect in terms of how the Part D basic benefit was structured. And that did change a lot of things, but there's a few incremental changes that are happening along the way here throughout 2026 we'll pay attention to that impacts, again, anyone who touches Part D coverage. And again, the overall evolution of the Part D benefit has happened over time here as well. So what we want to hit today, there's 5 things we want to accomplish in the next 45 minutes. First thing is we want to take a look at that Part D benefit over time and what it will look like in 2026, just to make sure that you are aware of where your beneficiaries' cost-sharing responsibilities will lie. We'll take a look at how drug negotiations and the new CMS subsidy for those negotiated drugs may impact premiums in the market going forward. So we'll outline what those are and talk about the possible impacts separately. We'll also take a look at, so wait a minute, if the Part D benefit is changing, has changed, how is it going to affect how is that going to impact the definition of creditable coverage, especially for those who continue to work while they're Medicare eligible? What does that mean for agents who consult those folks both this year and in years to come? And we'll wrap it up with a nice little discussion on the Medicare prescription payment program, which provides your beneficiaries an opportunity to kind of smooth their costs out through the year. Not a change necessarily per se, but because we're talking about Part D anyway, good things for you to know. Before we get started, Jessica and I have said hi to you. We'd love for you to say hi to us. Which of these statements best describes you? Is it A, you're brand new to the Medicare market? B, you have some experience in the market, but you're new to Action Benefits. C, you have some experience with Medicare in Action, but you're really curious about this topic. Or is it D, you're a seasoned pro, you just love spending time with us here today? I'd love to get an idea of where your head's at, what your familiarity level is. Go ahead, please, and just put one letter in the chat that best describes you. All right, lots of experience weighing in, lots of curiosity here. Well, hopefully we're here to sate that curiosity here today. For those of you newer to the market, welcome aboard. What an exciting time to get into Medicare and health insurance in general. Lots of stuff for you to learn, but we're here to help you through it. And so let's talk a little bit with that first bullet point here today, the Part D benefit over time. What does it look like in the recent past? What will it look for like for you in 2026? So we should point out today that what you're going to see on the screen, and I'm purposely not showing you anything yet, so don't worry, all you should see is a heading. What you're going to see on screen is the Part D standard benefit design. And that standard benefit design is kind of the bare bones that every Part D plan can offer throughout the 4 years that we're going to take a look at here. So you may see carriers with different copay percentages, different deductibles or no deductibles. That's okay. Carriers can choose to make benefits that are better than the standard Part D benefits we're going to show you here over time to try to entice membership, but they can't go lower than the bars, or they couldn't go lower than the bars we're about to show you here. So we're going to take a look at the Part D benefit over time on how that standard benefit, the baseline benefit, has changed in the past 4 years, knowing, of course, that carriers want those generally speaking, they want those Part D enrollees, and knowing that the Part D plans that you might represent individually have changed over time as well with their own copays, coinsurance, so on and so forth. If you have been in the Medicare market for a while, and by a while I mean since 2023 or before, that was like the last quote unquote normal year of the old way things used to be with the Part D benefit, where you had 4 coverage stages. Your beneficiary was 100% responsible for the deductible. You had the initial coverage phase where your beneficiaries had that 25% copay. Plans took up that 75%. Then you had that donut hole kick in, right? That was really weird. No one understood it. I'm pretty sure no one today still understands it, other than things got really a lot more expensive for a lot of people once they hit that coverage gap. And then you get to catastrophic coverage, where again, your enrollees are on the hook for about 5% of that, and Medicare picked up 80% of the cost. In 2024, the Part D benefits started to change ever so slightly, and sorry for the numbers that got crowded there on the bar here. But deductible, of course, your beneficiary was still 100% responsible for that. And in the initial coverage phase, again, you had the 25-75% split. The donut hole was the same, but the catastrophic coverage changed a little bit, right? Your beneficiaries instead had that about $8,000 out-of-pocket cap, give or take a few, where they had no responsibility once they passed the coverage gap, but the plan and CMS split the responsibility 75 or 8 on an 80-20 basis. 2025, where you're at now, we got rid of 4 coverage phases. We're down to 3 coverage phases. So again, there's that initial deductible phase where your folks are 100% responsible if your plan has a deductible. The initial coverage phase, where they have a copay of no more than 20, or coinsurance rather, of no more than 25% of the cost of the drug. But take a look at what happened to plan expenses, right? They're now responsible for 65% of the drug in that initial coverage phase, and the manufacturer picks up 10% of it there. And in the catastrophic coverage phase, again, so once your consumer passes $2,000 worth of eligible drug spending, the plan picks up 60%, the manufacturer picks up 20%, and Medicare picks up 20%. So if there was like one reason you had to point to for Part D premiums going through the roof this year, it's that, right? It's the change between 2024 and 2025, where plans had relatively little skin in the game, all things considered, to where now they're paying a boatload more for those drugs and covering a boatload more for those drugs. That base benefit design doesn't change at all in 2026. So that's the quote unquote good news. Everything you know in terms of those percentages stays the same. But what happens to those is in 2026, your deductible will go up to $615 on the base plans here. And your out-of-pocket threshold will not be $2,000 anymore. It will instead increase to $21,000. So the big things to take away for you as you prepare for next year is that plans are in the second year of the Part D redesign. It's entirely possible that as they've taken on more responsibility for paying for drugs, that there's still more correction to be done. And if maybe their actuaries guessed wrong, right, on how much they would have needed to pay out. So we're likely going to see a lot of moving and shaking and premium adjustments going forward. The deductible, again, on that standard benefit increases to $615, and that maximum out-of-pocket threshold for everyone does increase to $2,100 beginning on January 1, 2026. So everyone was really excited about that $2,000 cap this year, right? But that is inflation adjusted, and it's linked to really how much Medicare is spending on Part D benefits. And so because we're getting older and drugs are getting more, we collectively, the nation is getting older, drugs are getting more expensive, Medicare is paying more for those drugs, that out-of-pocket cap will edge upward as well. Jess, I see you nodding intently. What's on your mind here?
Nothing really. I mean, obviously, we know the drugs are getting more expensive, right? So that's, to your point, that's really the basis of this. And unfortunately, carriers are also having to fit that bill. So putting more on the consumer.
Yep. That money's going to come from somewhere. And so the other thing that comes into effect in 2026 is it's gotten a lot of news, right? As Medicare is now able to negotiate prices, and then they're now in the third cycle of negotiations. They negotiated the first cycle, they negotiated the second set of drugs, they're negotiating the third set of drugs, but that first set of 10, those negotiated prices go into effect on January 1 of 2026. So just as a refresher, CMS Medicare has negotiated prices on the set of 10 drugs you see on the screen here. And what they managed to achieve in those negotiations was a discount between 38 and 79% of the current list price, again, depending on the drug. We have an article on our website that gives you more detail about how much each drug was discounted here. But look at the drugs you do see here, right? These are some of the drugs that Medicare Part D spent the most on over the past few years. So looking at things like Januvia and Novolog and Varziga, Enbrel, Jardiance, Stelara, and you can read the rest here. It's just fun trying to read all these drug brand names and figure out where they made them up from and how they got there. What is Imbruvica? What is that word? Who knows? But just as I include this to say that these negotiated effects or negotiated prices go into effect next year. And is to sweeten the pot to help cover these drugs at these negotiated rates, CMS is issuing a subsidy to carriers to help them pay for these costs. So what does that look like, and how is that going to make its way into premiums? So your beneficiaries will see these prices go into effect on January 1st. Again, there's off the current list price, you're seeing that discount of anywhere between 38 and 72%, a pretty steep discount. So those are your folks who are paying out of pocket now for those drugs will get some relief. If the plan they're enrolled in does have the standard deductible, the beneficiary would be responsible for that full negotiated price unless and until they hit that deductible amount on their plan. If the plan has the partial or $0 deductible, and by partial deductible, I mean a deductible less than the $519, that's how CMS terms it, then the plan's cost sharing rules would apply. So they'd be responsible for that full deductible amount until they hit whatever the plan's cost sharing rules are. But what changes about how CMS covers these drugs is for every negotiated drug in this year and in years to come, in that initial coverage phase where the plan was picking up 65% of the cost, CMS now kicks in 10% of that over here as well. So you've got a split in that initial coverage phase. So after deductible is hit, where the beneficiary still has 25%, the plan's cost is a little bit reduced here on the 55%. You've got 10% from the manufacturer, 10% for CMS, and the catastrophic phase still stays the same. So what you see in this chart here is lower negotiated prices for these drugs and CMS helping to further subsidize the prices of those drugs. So that could potentially, knock on wood, put some lower downward pressures rather on premiums going forward for those drugs, because again, these drugs were selected as some of the top spenders for Part D, the top cost centers for Part D as a whole. So I've kind of sprinkled in some predictions here throughout the last little bit. Want to bring those together for you real quickly. There's really a lot of competing forces that could really dictate what we see coming into the market for contract year 2026. Plans are putting their bids in now. Their plans are due, or their bids rather are due by the end of August, or mid-August rather. So we likely won't see finite plan details till even later this year. But if I had to put my prediction hat on, here's a bit of what we'd see. So of course there's upward pressure on claims, right? There's increased use for all these drugs, increased use in specialty drugs. And again, carriers are shouldering this increased share of the prices for the second year. And you can see evidence of that everywhere, right? Look at current headlines. If I look at earnings reports from UHC or Humana, they're not as good as they might have wanted them to be. If I look at medical loss ratios embedded from those larger carriers that publish those, those MLRs are climbing ever upward, which means carriers are paying more in claims. So that puts upward pressure on premiums, or reduction in benefits, one of the two, right? So by and large, generally speaking, the state of the market ain't as healthy as carriers might want it to be here. And because carriers are still in this new world where they're taking on more of the risk for paying for drugs, we don't know whether or not they accurately priced that risk in 2025. So there may be even more correction coming for that risk, for that pricing in 2026. The negotiated prices, of course, do help to offset a bit of that exposure. So again, there's going to be a little bit more volatility. Hopefully that puts some downward pressure on premiums, as well as the CMS subsidy that's included in there as well. Again, we won't know anything for sure until bids are finalized and accepted by CMS and plans actually start releasing these things publicly. But there's a lot of factors that point to premiums edging upward, but with the help of negotiation process, the increase might not be as bad as we might otherwise be fearing. And premiums, by the way, we should point out, are not the only things that the only levers plans can pull here. You could see them add deductibles, lower tiers. A lot of carriers this year managed to avoid adding deductibles for tier 1, 2, and 3 drugs, but that's always an option, right? Instead of just deductibles on tiers 4 or tiers 4 and 5, you may see deductibles as a lower option to put a little more beneficiary skin in the game. They can certainly do that. They could remove some optional drugs from formularies. There is a set of drugs that Medicare says everyone that offers a Part D plan has to cover. These have to be on the formularies. But some of the extras, you could see formularies get a bit leaner in that regard. They could choose not to cover things anymore, or not cover brands and only cover generics as a way to sort of mitigate their costs there. You may see drugs shuffling around in different tiers again. I'll bet all the change in my pockets against all the change in yours. You're going to see at least a few drugs covered differently next year. And for all the news that reduction in utilization management, prior auths, and step therapy and whatnot, where carriers are saying, we want to get on the right side of that and make it easier to access drugs. If I'm looking at all this bigger financial picture here, I don't see a way where that gets really feasible for them. Even though they're publicly saying all the right things, right? I would imagine, especially as you get up to the tiers 4 and 5, you're going to see stricter and maybe even tier 3 drugs, right? With those more expensive brand drugs, you're going to see more stricter utilization management efforts to try and offset some of their costs there. All that said, ladies and gentlemen, I would expect, and we're all here expecting, that for as rough as last enrollment season might have been, this season will be right about the same, if not maybe even a little tougher, as carriers try to figure things out and adjust to new reality here. Love to hear some thoughts from you, and Jess and I have some of our own as well. What are some ways that you might prepare for a potentially tough enrollment season? I would love to see a few words from you in the chat, and Jess, love to hear your thoughts here as well.
Well, we know, prescription prices are going up. So to Randy's point, movement in those tiers or removal completely from the formulary. Maybe looking at online pharmacies or mail order as a way to save your clients some money. I'm looking at, the PPO essential plan with Blue Cross for those 90-day supplies. They do get a break for those tier 3 drugs if they're doing mail order, and tiers 1, 2, and 3 really. So maybe looking at that, making sure pharmacies are in network. We've seen a lot of movement in the news. There was an article about what happened in Arkansas with CVS shuttering some of their retail pharmacies, or really all of them, because of a law that was put into place. But you really got to pay attention to what's going on in the news, and just making sure that those pharmacies, we saw the Rite Aids closing, Walgreens closing. So moving those members to mail order through the PBMs that are offered through the carriers. So just really paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, and I think looking within the carrier, sure, for other options is one great strategy, especially if you're customers are comfortable where they're at. They've built that loyalty. You've built that loyalty with the carrier. And I would also encourage you to look at diversifying your portfolio here as well. We don't know, you don't know, no one has inside information on which carriers might cut commissions again, right? We've already heard UHC is not paying new business commissions effective on Part D business standalone effective 3 days ago rather. And while we know that you're always working in the best interest of the beneficiary, you also don't work for free. So make sure that you are representing a variety of plans, that can take care of your beneficiaries' needs, look at a variety of price points, but maybe add on some of those national carriers that do have a variety of price points that your beneficiaries can access, and hopefully that pay you here as well. If you'd like to take a look at your portfolio, talk with your account manager, talk with Jessica. I'm happy to take a look at you too. And we can, think about what makes sense, right? So you can future-proof both for yourself and for your clients for this AEP. That being said, so the Part D benefit is changing. That means creditable coverage has to change. That means the definition of creditable coverage has to change. And boy, it's going to be a doozy in the next few years as we see that. But let's make sure everyone has a good understanding of what we mean by creditable coverage and then take a look at what that doozy of a change is going to be. Creditable coverage is important to anyone working in the prescription drug space, whether you're working in the Medicare market, right? There's a lot of folks who choose to work beyond 65, so you need to know whether or not their employers offer creditable drug coverage, or if you're exclusively on the group benefit side, again, you need to know whether that employer has a creditable group drug plan, so you know whether that Medicare eligibles might need to pick up a standalone Part D plan to help them avoid that LEP later down the road. So when we talk about creditable coverage, we're talking about coverage that is at least as good or better than the standard Part D benefit. That language comes directly from CMS. The way that is determined, how a plan determines whether or not it offers creditable coverage, is that actuaries for those employer plans must certify their status each planned year, and the employer has the obligation to communicate to beneficiaries or Medicare eligibles whether coverage will be credible for the upcoming year by October 15th, the beginning of AEP for each year. So employers have an obligation to report this. They're often looking to you, independent agents, to help them report that, right? So let's take a look at how we figure out whether or not coverage is creditable. And again, one of the big changes to take a look at down the road. So there are two ways a coverage can be determined creditable. Generally, larger self-funded plans, there is a series of actuarial tests that CMS outlines, and because these larger self-funded plans employ their own actuaries or their own TPAs to do this kind of work for them, they tend to go that route and go through a giant rigmarole to prove that, yes, our coverage is at least as good as Part D benefit. Other plans might use a simplified determination method here as well that's available to them. And if a plan is going to meet creditable coverage definition here, there's a few points that it has to hit. First one is that it must offer coverage for both brand drugs and generic drugs, just like the Part D plans would. It has to have a reasonable access to retail providers. So it doesn't say anything, doesn't prescribe a specific network size, but if you have an employer-sponsored plan in Southeast Michigan, there's got to be reasonable access to pharmacies that you can fill prescriptions at in Southeast Michigan. Here's the big one. Here's where things are going to change a little bit and where this might break a few different ways. Creditable coverage right now, that threshold is the plan must pay on average at least 60% of every Part D enrollee or every Medicare beneficiary or Medicare beneficiary eligible's drug expenses. And that, but optionally here in for 2026 and mandatory in 27 is that threshold increases up to 72%. So there's a few different ways that can break, right? Either plans adjust their drug benefit upward to become creditable at that 72% threshold, or you're going to have a lot more folks that don't have creditable coverage and need to find a solution otherwise. Plans must also satisfy at least one of the two conditions down below. If they do have a carved out prescription benefit, there must be no annual max on that benefit, or have an annual max at least $25,000, or the plan pays at least $2,000 per Medicare eligible individual. If they have an integrated benefit, like many small group plans do, the drug deductible has got to be less than $250, again, with no annual max. Or that annual max must exceed $25,000 and a no less than $1 million yearly combined max between drug and medical claims. So again, the big thing here is that that threshold moves up significantly from 60% to 72%. That means carriers and employer groups in 2026, there's a bit of safe harbor to keep things as they are. But if you're looking ahead to plan year 2027, beginning January 1, 2027, that drug benefit has to get richer in order to still meet that definition. And everyone's going to have some big decisions about what they do with their drug coverage at that point. Carriers do have a few different channels they might use to notify you of and the group whether or not coverage is creditable. Some carriers are really friendly about it. They do embed it in the renewal package. Maybe you have a group with UHC, you see determinations of credibility right there in the renewal package. It makes it easier. Other carriers make it more of a scavenger hunt for you, where you have to go taking a look around, find some pass fail charts and figure out, do a pass and eye test really essentially to figure out whether this specific plan was creditable in this particular year. Some carriers also offer to take on the barrier or the burden of direct member mailings, letting them know that what plans have creditable coverage and what plans don't. Again, that really works, depends on a particular carrier. And if you're working with Blue Cross, Blue Cross's position on this generally is that it is the group's responsibility to do that. They'll arm you with the pass-fail charts, but it's up to you, the independent agent, to work with the group on getting that notice out to beneficiaries. Speaking of which, pass-fail charts generally come out in July of each year, whether that's early July or late July, as they do plan. They finalize rates for the year coming up and finalize what their plan details are for the year coming up. So keep a lookout in your email inbox. We'll let you know when those are available, and make sure you're well prepared to talk with beneficiaries about how Blue Cross or Blue Cross plans or Blue Care Network plans are handling that going forward. But there is a strong possibility going forward that coverage won't be creditable. So here is, and because that might happen in 2027, which sounds like a long way away, but it's not, some things that you might want to think about. You want to think about the employer group size. How many are employed there? If it's less than 20 without creditable coverage, your group member probably has to pick up parts A and B and a standalone drug plan in order to avoid the A or B rather, likely B as well, to avoid that Part D LEP down the road. You'd also have to look at whether their medical and RX coverage is integrated or is it carved out. If the RX is truly standalone and you have options to purchase a richer RX benefit, whether for a segment of the group or for the entire group, that could be an option for you as well as you look at how to approach your benefits. And again, you'd want to look at their current Part A and B status to help you make some decisions about what to do with them going forward. And generally speaking, though, they're going to have two options, and there's a lot more nuance here than we see on the screen, but that's what our group team is here for. That's what Jessica's here for, depending on the market you work in. Those folks who don't have creditable coverage generally have two options. The first one is they keep their group health plan. If they do that, they enroll in Part A and or B, again, depending on group size and payer rules. Less than 20, they definitely want to pick up Part B. And they take their initial enrollment period or the loss of creditable coverage SEP, or even use AEP to enroll in a standalone PDP. But keep in mind that Medicare payer rules would apply throughout all that scenario. They could also choose to leave their group health plan. They could waive coverage and enroll in parts A and B, and again, use the applicable enrollment periods to pick up an MAPD or PDP or MedSup, depending on their specific options. And they could also use that loss of creditable coverage SEP to enroll in that MedSup or PDP with guaranteed issue rights at that point there as well. So lots of moving parts to consider going forward, but just want to make sure you're aware of that because there's some prep work you might need to lay down for your groups as they're looking a year or two down the road. So as we think about this, how could this impact your consultations with Medicare eligibles that are still working, whether it's in 2026 and even down the road in 2027? What are some things that you might need to look out for as you work with those folks? And Jess, would love to hear what's on your mind here too.
In regards to that SEP, I just want to put out there that it's 2 full months from that loss. So making sure that you're getting them enrolled in that PDP within those 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Timing is everything, right? With Medicare in terms of when you enroll and when you can enroll. There's a lot of potential, maybe not a lot of disruption this year or even in 2026. But we have to kind of wait and see what carriers do with their benefits going forward into 2027 to figure out how much you'll need to really work with folks, whether individuals or group members, to figure out what coverage they need and what helps them avoid paying penalties down the road. Last thing we want to talk about today is give you a quick refresher on the Medicare prescription payment plan. Frankly, CMS was a little surprised on how few people took it up this year. Last numbers I saw were about 0.5% of all beneficiaries were enrolled in the program. So didn't go as well, didn't go as well as CMS had wanted in that rollout. But there are plenty of opportunities for you to consider it, and there are opportunities for you to put it in front of beneficiaries as part of your client outreach and education programs here as well. So what does the program do? Who is eligible? Any Part D is eligible to enroll in the plan, though it's not a good fit for everyone, to be clear. But what it does is allows any Part D enrollee to enroll with their carrier and pay their out-of-pocket drug costs and cap monthly payments up to that out-of-pocket maximum, which in 2026 will be that $2,100. How does the program work? Generally speaking, anyone that has a drug fill costing over $600 a month will be notified at the pharmacy. But if maybe you've only got a drug that's $580 a month or so, your insured can opt in at any time by contacting their Part D plan, whether it's the standalone Part D or the MAPD carrier. And what the carrier will do is combine all of their out-of-pocket prescription costs and divide their payments over the remainder of the year to give them a flat installment rate for through December of that year. What'll happen though, or what does happen when your members go to get drugs filled, is they're $0 at the pharmacy. Instead, they're owing payment to the plan via mail or whatever other payment methodologies they have. So $0 on pickup. Instead, they're paying their Part D plan for the drug, and the Part D sponsors then pay the pharmacies in full for that drug. So the pharmacies are still getting paid either way. It's just a matter of when and who is paying them, so to speak. What is new, though, in 2026 as part of the final rule that came down this spring, as long as your beneficiary is re-enrolling in the same drug plan or MAPD, they'll be automatically re-enrolled in the program. So if you have someone who took advantage of it this year and they don't move at all, they don't have to do anything to opt into the program again. They'll automatically be re-enrolled. But if you have someone that changes drug plans, even within the same carrier, so you move from a PPO essential to literally anything else, they would need to actively re-enroll with the program. Their enrollment is tied to a specific drug benefit package within the carrier. So even if you choose a different PDP from the same carrier, again, you would need to actively re-enroll with the carrier in order to claim the benefit here. Beneficiaries are free to voluntarily cancel or withdraw from the program at any time. Maybe as if they go in and they say, gosh, that monthly number is really not what I was expecting. I'm not really seeing the savings I thought I would. And that can happen, right? Depending on when in the year they enroll. They can withdraw at any time. Carriers can also involuntarily terminate the plan after a grace period of not less than 2 months. So if your beneficiary goes more than 60 days without paying their share or their monthly installments, the carrier can kick them out of the plan. But the carrier, or kick them out of the payment plan, to be clear, but they can't terminate Part D coverage for failure to make payments on this program. So in other words, they would just simply revert back to having to pay at the pharmacy counter and pay their premiums as general, but they wouldn't be lose their Part D coverage if they did not keep up with their monthly installments here. And again, if the beneficiary does switch their Part D plan at any point throughout the year, so maybe they do take advantage of, maybe they move coverage areas or move out of service areas, they again would need to re-enroll with a new carrier. That enrollment doesn't travel with them. All that said, what seems important to remember about the Medicare prescription payment program? Jess, is there anything that stands out to you that you heard or have heard from agents or seen otherwise about it?
I don't think that it was a highly utilized program, which is why they made some changes to it. I think making sure that agents are fully explaining this to their beneficiaries would be helpful. And I would say if you don't really understand how this program works, you could definitely reach out to us. We could help walk you through it. But really, this program's in place for those high cost drugs. We know those drugs in that tier 4, tier 5, they're costly. And if someone's got a deductible, can they afford that $600 upfront? So just making sure that you guys understand the program and that you're explaining it to the beneficiaries.
Yeah, that's a real good point. And that again, what you're looking at doing is spreading out that $2,100 next year is spreading out that financial responsibility over the course of 12 months or whatever months they enroll in the program, how many months remaining in the year, really can provide some predictability for your beneficiaries if they do have high cost drugs on what they'll owe and when. So all that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and attention here today. Always love sharing what we know with you and helping bring you up to speed on what's going in the market here around you. Lots of moving parts, of course, to keep track of, and we will help you stay aware of those things. You're welcome to stay in touch with us on LinkedIn at the Action Benefits Company. You can always find me at learning@actionbenefits.com or reach our main line at 248-356-8585 or get in touch with your account manager as you might need, or the individual team at individual@actionbenefits.com as well. Just call us. We'll figure it out. Just get in touch. Jess, anything to say to the folks before we close out for the day?
I would just say take a look at the Action Benefits website. We definitely have, Randy and Chelsea have done a great job of creating articles. So, check it out. Check out our training calendar. Make sure you sign up. We've got a lot of trainings. Randy does a great job again, making sure that there's a training every Wednesday. So sign up. There's a lot of changes this year. So.
Thank you. Just thank you, Mike, for the kind words here as well. Thank everyone for your time and attention here today. It's not always easy to get an hour or 38 minutes away from writing and selling insurance or servicing or what you might do. But so we're always grateful for the time you're able to take and spend with us here in the morning. Should you have any questions, please reach out to us via any method you see on the screen or any method you didn't see on the screen and you've heard about here as well. We look forward to seeing you again at another Action Academy session. Please enjoy the rest of your day and stay cool out there.